Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Joe.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast. And this week, we're reviewing Hardcore Henry.
More like Parkour Henry.
Welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, featuring two guys getting strange and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And a special thanks to Nick Ocello for that suggestion. He was actually supposed to join us on this episode, but...
We miss you, Niggy. Wish you could be here, Niggy.
but he was unable to make it. Make sure you check him out on twitch.com/
Tumbledore-Z.
Tumbledore.
Or twitch.tv/ Tumbledore-Z,
True.
I think.
Twitch.tv/Tumbledore-Z.
If he were here, he could tell you his links, but he's not.
He'll be on the next batch, I'm sure. But if you want to talk about...
Yeah, this week we're drinking Carnival Ale from The Lost Abbey, brewed and bottled by The Lost Abbey in San Marcos, California. My brother told me about this brewery, and they exclusively only do beers, as far as I know, I'm not sure what it's just a big bottle. I'm not even sure what the volume is. 9.4, or 1 pint and 9.4 fluid ounces. So there's like big craft beer bottles that you always see.
Right.
In the liquor store.
Shout out to Dan King.
Shout out to Dan King, my bro. Big bro.
Baby big bro. Baby big
bro. He's a big fan of those. I have no idea how to open one of these because I've never...
It's got like a wire contraption wrapped around a cork. I don't know why we thought this would be
I don't
fun
know what I'm doing.
To approach this bottle live on the... Coming to you live...
Joe, Google how to do this while I'm trying to do that.
The podcast. All right, so how do you open a Coke?
Maybe this. There we go. I think Daddy got it. You gotta loosen that shit up.
Good. I'm glad I don't have to search this.
You don't even know what to type in for that bottle. Oh, this is gonna have a good sound. I can feel it.
Woo!
Oh, that smells good. Give me that glass, boy.
Nice. Ooh. Isn't that smooth glass pouring sound?
Glug.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Get that real close to the mic so you guys can hear.
Whew. Hasn't been this long of a silence since Batman vs. Superman.
Since Jaeger bombs.
Yes.
Yeah, but I wanted something from Lost Abbey, and I was reading the description on the back. I thought it sounded pretty good. This beer is our tribute to that grand celebration of the unexpected. A Saison-style blonde ale with American hops, and, well, that's all you really need to know. Well, that's all we need to know.
Right. And if you guys ever want to give us a beer suggestion, if you're ever really, for a beer... go ahead and send it our way at our Twitter at HMF Podcast. I'm gonna take a sip of this now.
I got a lot of head on my. Got a lot of head on mine.
This is definitely. I don't know what this is.
It's a Saison. I definitely taste that.
Yeah, I can taste that. This is on. We should definitely become more knowledgeable about beer.
Yeah, for a beer podcast, we really don't know how to describe beer very well.
Has that bittery kind of Saison taste.
It has a little bit of hops in it too, so.
It does.
I actually like this though. Maybe not the best beer for 2:30 in the morning. This is
it is 2:30 a.m. 2:32.
Recorded a batch of 4 tonight. we record them a little bit out of order. So this is the fourth one we're recording, but it'll be released second, I believe, out of the four.
Right. For those of you who have heard about the legendary fourth episode, this is it, but it's coming to you. It's
Second in
is
the
the second
rotation.
episode. So I don't know how this episode's gonna be. Is it gonna be a little? It's not. It doesn't feel like it's gonna be a wild episode. It feels like it's gonna be more.
We're
just
more
sort
into
of
like the tired territory of like, oh god,
Definitely.
Let's get through this and go to sleep.
Maybe I'll drink this saison, get a little craison,
Say
craisonia. All right.
I know we wanted to talk about this episode because I guess this week for us the Birth of a Nation trailer came out,
Right.
which we've referenced a few times in past episodes with what's his phrase from Batman vs Superman.
I don't know.
Anyway, he produced it, and then
I know it goes even further back when we were doing the Oscar
one of the Oscar episodes.
episodes. Just to reference, I think we said that this film was going to win Best Picture in the 2017 Oscars.
Yeah, let it be known that on what is today, April. Well, now it's April 17th because it's Sunday. On April
Right.
17th, How Many Fingers podcast predicted that The Birth of a Nation would win Best Picture at the 2017 Oscars.
I feel like we even implied that before the 2016 Oscars really were.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we implied it.
Well, just the
Now we're announcing our general. I mean, no. I'd like to say that back in. No way. Here's what I'm gonna say. All right, but just like we called Spotlight winning when the Spotlight episode came out, but then we changed our answer to the Revenant winning. That was just jokes.
we were just kidding.
Just
You
got-
guys got it right
The Lord got jokes.
all day.
Oh boy.
But I think with a combination of like the backlash that the Oscars received this year from Oscars So White and all that,
Right.
the combination of the perennial like white guilt that we see at like the Oscars,
Definitely.
but then this feels like a movie that actually like lives up to the just the inevitable like awards that it's going to receive. Like looking at the
Right.
trailer, the trailer's fucking beautiful. If you haven't seen it, check it out. The Birth of a Nation trailer. It's got the Nina Simone version of Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday in the background,
I was
which
saying,
is really, really the lyrics and just the performance of it too is very chilling. Obviously, with the undertones of that.
I just wanted the second half of the trailer. They played it in the first half of the trailer. Second half of the trailer, I just wanted to be like, I was trying to clear my mind now. He's been raisin since the summertime. If anyone hasn't listened to Kanye West Blood on the Leaves, I encourage you to go listen to
that samples the Nina Simone version
right,
of Strange Fruit.
and it has fantastic.
But yeah, this looks beautiful, and you said this, so I can't take credit for this, but it looks like the film that we kind of wanted 12 Years a Slave to be, where 12
Exactly.
Years a Slave, it's a decent movie. I enjoyed it. I really didn't think it deserved to win everything that year,
No,
even though it
it did
deserved to
not.
be nominated. Whereas this is just like, just fucking dark and like gritty, and like even just in like the composition of the shots and the cinematography, like
Right.
it just looks like beautiful.
It also doesn't look like it has a trailer line. It's not like the Amistad, like, give us free, or like the trailer line of 12 Years a Slave was like,
I don't want to survive. I want to live.
yeah, I don't want to survive. I want to live. Like, it was just very obviously written as sort of a trailer standout line.
Yeah.
Um,
But trailer looks good, so check it out. And remember that we predicted on April 17th that it would win Best Picture.
Even
So,
before that.
so when this sweeps the Oscars and wins Best Picture, we were right.
you were wrong.
I'm just assuming that you doubted us. But yeah, like we said many minutes ago, we're reviewing Hardcore Henry, and the IMDb description It's a first-person action film from the eyes of Henry, who is resurrected from death with no memory. He must discover his identity and save his wife from a warlord with a plan to bioengineer soldiers.
It's kind of spot on. It's pretty good. It's not often that you see an IMDb description with 2 sentences.
Yeah.
Usually,
Usually it's just one. It is spot on for what ends up happening, but I feel like this is a movie that you can't read about.
Yeah.
If you're at all curious about it, you just have to go see this
You
movie.
do,
It's an experience, whether it's good or bad. That's up to you.
exactly.
But you really can't. It's even going to be hard for us to try and capture this in a review. What
It
it's
will,
like to
yeah.
see this movie. Very very unique and out there.
I have a little bit of Joe notes.
The infamous Joe Notes.
Joe notes. So Hardcore Henry was directed by Ilya Naishuller.
Nieschler.
Nieschler. This was his directorial debut. And from my understanding, my gosh, this beer is making me all weird gassy. But Hardcore Henry came from when Naishuller created a music video for his band.
2 music videos actually.
Oh, okay. I mean, I think the one that was recognized was titled Biting Elbows Bad Motherfucker, which was essentially a 3-minute long version of Hardcore Henry.
He also did the Stampede for his band too, as well. Was another first-person one. I don't know if it was as Hardcore Henry as that one, but
Right. Yeah, I have no idea. And from there, that was released on the internet. And the director of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter sent him a Facebook message that said, "You should make a feature-length film." And from there, I'm assuming he sent some producers his way. And from there, I'm assuming Ilya was able to make this film. It's really the background that I have. What a bizarre background on this film, right?
it is interesting. Yeah,
It's kind of. Did you
And
know
it's
that
kinda like
about
the-
the vampire?
I didn't know about that part. I knew that this really only got made because he made 2 movies for his band Biting Elbows, and even his band Biting Elbows, people really only know about them. They're like a Russian indie rock group. Only know about them because those videos kind of went viral because they were. I haven't watched them yet, but they were
Right.
supposedly the same style and just unique and in that way. And they were filmed on the GoPro Hero 3 camera, which this one was filmed almost entirely on as well,
Right. Yeah.
using this like specially built rig that the camera person or the actor both kind of at the same time wear like a mask to film it.
Right. So, I mean, do we want to talk about theater experiences? Because my theater experience, and I think I was telling this to you earlier, was that I went to go see it, I believe at like 10 p.m. on like maybe opening night, I think. And I was the only person in the theater. From what I understand, it didn't do well at the box office. I think it opened 5th or 6th, below My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2. So maybe there isn't a lot. I mean, if you want to go into your theater experience, and I think you might have a little more insight on the history of Hardcore Henry.
Just a tiny bit. I mean, my theater experience was pretty basic. I see all these movies by myself. I feel like for the podcast, I've seen
But I mean,
many,
was
but
there anybody else in the theater?
a couple sitting in the back who were probably annoyed that I got there because they couldn't give theater hand jobs and whatnot.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The only real history I have, it premiered at the 2015 Toronto International Film Festival, and it was originally just titled Hardcore,
Uh-huh.
and was later renamed to Hardcore Henry after it was purchased. It was purchased for $10 million, and as of the weekend that we're recording this, which is April 16th or 17th now that we're into Sunday at 2:42 a.m. It's grossed only $7 million, so I'll suspect that it's going to make the money back slowly and eventually. We were talking about this before, and it's kind of like a low risk thing for the distribution studio to buy it for $10 billion. It's like,
who ended up getting it? Because I know there was like kind of a bidding war, because this was, what film fest was it at?
Toronto International Film Festival. I think
this was like one of the most talked about things at Toronto.
There was a bidding war between Lionsgate, Universal, and STX, and ultimately STX acquired the worldwide rights.
So I'm glad this went beyond sort of just an independent film that people were like, oh, did you see hardcore? And because of that bidding war, and my God, a wide release, which I think is phenomenal for this film.
That's gotta feel great to be like just in like a indie rock group in Russia, make like 2 music videos like that you're just doing yourself for the band to like save money and shit, and then you end up making a full length movie. And a studio's like, here's $10 million. We'll take it from here. Like, the movie's already made. They're just like,
they do a wide release.
Sure, there was only like minor changes to it because it still felt like a Russian kind of like indie film.
Definitely, yeah. And and again, the scale of this release is crazy.
Yeah,
it's in every theater. I mean, I had a harder time finding Midnight Special or, Hello, My Name is Doris, kind of, more than I had trouble finding Hardcore Henry.
Even like the advertising, like I feel like I saw this trailer like numerous times in other movies before this coming out. We talked about
this trailer. I mean, I think you and I sat down and showed Jordan, your roommate, the trailer to Hardcore Henry, because we were like, we've seen this so many times in theaters.
It is a great trailer.
It's a fantastic
I feel like
trailer,
if the trailer had been cut like any other way, I probably wouldn't have pushed to see this movie or have gone to see it myself, like outside of the podcast. But it's like they have what's the Queen song, Don't Stop Me Now, or Don't Stop Me, or whatever.
Yeah.
Playing in the background. It's a really cool cut trailer.
Right.
To really like it. I think it does a good job of not painting it as like a Call of Duty film, like a lot of other like trailers could have. It really just makes it portrayed as like a feel good, like fun, just action, balls to the wall movie.
Which it is, I think.
Which is exactly what it is. It is a little bit of a Call of Duty movie as well, but
it definitely appeals to its audience. I think it was a brilliant trailer, whoever cut it. I mean, this is the perfect movie to cut a trailer to. I think I could have cut like 30 different trailers to this and made it look incredible. I mean, we joke, but when I was watching it, I did refer to it in my head as Parkour Henry. There's a lot of parkour in here, and I've had a headache all week, so I also referred to it as Headache Henry. I also laughed about it being a weird sequel to Diving Bell and the Butterfly. There's just a little something for people out there. But I think the non-stop, even before I saw this film, the sort of non-stop aspect, which it had to be. There was no other way we're going to go into this film, and it was going to be like, oh, he stops and he talks to like a bunch of people. The nonstop aspect reminded me of the sort of like films like Run Lola Run and even Cranked, which I think appropriately, I think Cranked more appropriately kept like a constant momentum more than this film, or even like a constant adrenaline. And unlike Hardcore Henry, Cranked has a main character who's charismatic. Yeah. Say what you will about Jason Statham. I mean, he's essentially a meme to. I wish Nick was here because he's kind of like a meme to Nick and I.
Yeah.
But I think he knows exactly what he's doing. Whereas opposed to Hardcore Henry, he's brought into this world, and he's brought back to this world, and he is zero memory, and he just kind of has to. I mean, he has zero personality.
Well, it's probably because there's literally 10 separate actors that played quote unquote Henry in the film,
right?
Including the director Ilya Nyashuller, and then a lot of the people that played Henry were literally just like cameramen for the film, obviously because it's a GoPro rig being worn
right
on his head to play this Henry guy.
So right from the beginning, the opening scene, I kind of really liked. I mean, you see it in the trailer. Shit, sorry, I dropped my pen. It's sort of like right off the bat, it's sort of reminiscent of that scene in RoboCop, where he's in like the hospital bed and everything's sort of POV, and he's lying in the hospital and he's being fitted for his robot parts, and he's sort of like opening and closing his hand. Oh, it's a fantastic film, RoboCop. And then from there, I mean, so he has this. I forget exactly what the woman's name is.
Stell.
Okay.
Haley Bennett is the actor who I think looks like a porn parody version of Jennifer Lawrence.
Definitely. I don't even know if I would take it to Jennifer Lawrence, but she looks like a porn star.
I think she looks like Jennifer Lawrence light, like
right. But anyway, she introduces herself as a doctor, and then later Henry's former lover, as he wakes up and he has zero memory. Again, it's all POV, so she's saying, like, do you remember me? And the camera shakes, like, horizontal. From there, she fits him with his robot parts. From there, she takes him into another room, and she says, like, let's get your voice sort of modulated.
This is where, like, even, like, before we saw the movie, like, we were joking, like, oh, it's kind of like Call of Duty, like, the movie, like, but, like, the beginning scenes just felt so much like the intro, like, tutorial, like, levels of, like, a video game, like, where there's a scene where she's, like, testing out his hand, and she, like, puts, like, an orange in her hand, and she's like, here, squeeze this, like, press X to squeeze this.
Right, yeah.
And then when she takes him to that other room, one of those guys, I'm not sure which, is actually the director, Ilya Nyashuller, playing that.
Right.
But then they're, like, trying to, like, customize his voice, and they're like, oh, like, let's pick out your voice, and that, like, if it had been, like, a video game, that would be the scene where they're like, oh, like, let's pick out your face, too. Like,
right, yeah.
Customize your character.
And I think Henry, and obviously the villain comes in before they're able to pick out his voice, which is obviously a deliberate choice by the filmmaker not to give him a voice, because that would just kind of even make it more of a sort of post-nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's easier to do that.
But it also ends up playing into that, like, video game,
oh, definitely, right,
like, feel of, like, you know, like Master Chief, where he, like, only talks during, like, the cut scenes, and, like, just any video game, like, your character rarely talks, you know, while you're in the actual first person action.
As long as we're talking about video games, I do have a bit to say about video games. I think whereas in 13 Hours, the Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, I think I criticized the plot for being like the plot of a video game, which I think I used video game as a derogatory term. I think comparing Hardcore Henry to a video game is more of a compliment. I think the direct correlation between a video game campaign and the plot of Hardcore Henry was more of a smart marketing move, because this film will generally be marketed, or it was marketed just generally towards kids who watch like 10 hours of video game walkthroughs or playthroughs. But yeah, every scene or cluster of scenes sort of has like this, it's set up very specifically where it has like an initial objective, and then it'll be like, go kill this man robot and take his charging unit out of his chest, like, so you can survive.
Yeah.
And from there they'll be like, from there they'll like inject like stealth or like shoot 'em up like in sort of like getaway
Well, then
scenes.
it's literally got the added element of being literally first person, so it's literally
Yeah.
it feels exactly like a first person shooter. Mm-hmm. Like there was a few other things that I wrote down that felt so video game like the fact that he starts out just like meleeing people,
Right,
and then,
yeah.
then he gets a pistol, and then gradually he'll get a bigger gun later on, and then eventually he moves on to like vehicle like levels to
Yeah.
like spice things up, where he's like got like the gunner seat on like a biped motorcycle type thing.
But did that bother you? Did that, or were you into that kind of thing?
I think in some of the earlier parts of the movie, because we should talk about the actual opening scene is like a flashback to Henry being bullied as a child, and it's actually a pretty kind of cool visual scene. It's pretty cinematic, and I don't think it's actually filmed on the GoPro. There's a pretty distinct difference in film quality there.
Right.
And then like some of the music in like the earlier scenes is like kind of like big and like emotional and dramatic, and I think I thought that they might be trying to go in a different direction, but then once you see like 15 to 20 minutes of the movie, you're like, okay, I know exactly what kind of movie this is trying to be. It's
Right,
just
yeah,
balls to the wall action the entire time, and once I settled into that, I enjoyed most things for the rest of the film, once you kind of throw out any expectation of it being a serious movie that takes itself seriously.
Right.
So once I got into that, I didn't really mind some of these video game comparisons, because it's just a completely ridiculous movie that knows it's being ridiculous and is trying to be ridiculous. Because it's got like the he's like on like a fucking like gunner seat of like a biped or I don't know what you call it, like a sidecar of like a motorcycle type thing, and then there's literally like a horde mode towards like the end of the movie.
Right, yeah.
There's a final boss fight at the end.
And
then he even uses like power-ups throughout the movie with like
Yeah.
charging his batteries. He uses adrenaline at one point in the movie. Mm-hmm. Like it felt like it would have made a really, like, I wish there's a Hardcore Henry video game, because I would probably buy it and play it.
But definitely, I mean, after he has his wife construct him, essentially, we are introduced to the character of I forget exactly what his name is. Akan.
Jimmy.
Akan.
Oh no, the villain. Yeah, Akon.
Akon. Yahweh to. Oh wait, no.
Like Sean Kingston.
Sean Kingston. Yahweh to beautiful girl.
Akon's I'm so paid.
But so Akon
Doing
comes.
90 and a 65.
Why are you trying to take my money? What happened to Akon?
Snipers on the roof, they already saw, y'all.
Akon hasn't done anything for a while.
Well, he's been doing like real shit over in Africa. He did that shit where he like was building like a school in like every town in like Africa or something.
Really?
Some weird shit where he's spending like a fortune over in Africa, like making like real difference.
What a good guy.
And like
He's-
was not getting nearly as much press as he should have gotten for what he's doing over there.
And I think he also essentially recognized Lady Gaga and put her into fame or whatever.
Red one.
Jeez, Akon. He kind of disappeared. I kind of wish he would come back into the...
Why did we take Akon for granted?
Now that you say that, when you say like he isn't getting as much press, yeah.
I think it was something. It might have been more with like bringing like power over to like the third world, like parts of like Africa. Like maybe he's just building like power lines and something. It was something where he's spending like a lot of money for something that like public works should be doing over there, and they obviously aren't or can't.
Right. And it's funny because after that sort of, I don't want to get too off topic, but after that sort of story so far, concert footage where he kicks the girl off the stage, immediately what I thought of is when the news kind of like crucified Akon for, there was something where he was in South Africa and an underage girl came on stage and he simulated, they called it, he simulated rape, but I think he just kind of simulated sex towards her on stage.
Well, I guess because she's underage and simulating rape.
Right, yeah. And I didn't think it was too terrible. I think it was a little excessive. But I think Akon's like a good guy. I think drop kicking somebody off a stage is a little worse. But Akon, come back. Anyway.
Weird tangent.
Akon, I'm just gonna call it. He might be Akan. It's spelled Akan. I don't know. They didn't say his name a lot.
Maybe it was Akin, or
I don't know. I just, in my mind, during this film, I just called him Hans. Like
Hans Gruber.
Like the diehard antagonist or villain. It's a really cool opening scene, though, with all of that stuff. And even though they're kind of like, it's kind of like Mad Max-esque. Like, I didn't like that about Mad Max-esque. Like, oh, this is sci-fi guitars. Like, you know, kind of like cool. But they do, you know, Akon comes in and he tries to steal Hardcore Henry and
trying to take my money.
and then they escape, and both Henry and his wife escape in a single escape pod, because I thought it was a cool detail, but like some like scientist there was like, "Fuck you guys," and like gets into like a escape pod, and I really liked the escape pod scene. Like, it was a cool effect. They use it in the trailer because obviously they know it's a very cool effect. I wish there was more of this sort of sci-fi element in the film.
Yeah, the rest of it is kind of grounded once he like literally gets on the ground.
Right. But he gets on the ground. Akon steals his girl. And then Akon's crew pushes him off a bridge or overpass of some sort.
Red one. Red one.
And this is where he meets the Jimmy character. And the Jimmy character, I don't even know if this first guy his name is Jimmy.
I think they're all their names.
They're all called Jimmy? Okay, so he meets this Jimmy character who's basically a Jason Statham character, and he's like, "Oi, you need help?" Like, kind of like, and he's got guns, and he's
just speech module and sound.
Yeah. And he seems to have it all figured out. He puts Hardcore Henry he puts Henry in the car, and he defeats all these henchmen who are after him, and he explains to him, and he has him plug into like his chest, and he says, you know, like, your battery power is pretty low and everything. And then all of a sudden, very quickly, they get into a car accident, and or he's shot in the back of the head.
I think he's just shot.
Yeah, I think he's shot in the back of the head, and like, here's this guy who's going to help Henry, and his brains are just splattered all over the windshield, which I think brings up this sort of reoccurring joke that this reoccurring Jimmy character is kind of like the like, oh my god, you killed Kenny, like, character from like South Park. Like, you see the same guy reoccurring, but he's killed multiple times.
Yeah, I guess what it turns out to be is that he is the one that's responsible for creating this, essentially what the technology that leads to Henry, which is kind of
right,
bringing dead bodies back to life, reanimation type thing, Linkin Park and remixing. I love that album. Yeah, he kind of invented this technology.
It's kind of like a collision course.
It's just, you know, he has this hybrid theory. And it's kind of like his Meteora, and he's only got minutes till midnight. That's his part. There might be an album after that, but I don't know what it is.
Mike knows too many Linkin Park references for my comfort.
I was in the LP Underground for 4 years. It's not a joke. I've got the badges to prove it.
Down, down, down. Oh yeah.
Oh god, what a great / weird fucking album.
I saw that live.
Collision Course.
Yes, I saw the entirety.
Oh, you went to the Live 8 or whatever.
I saw
didn't
the
you?
entirety of that live at Live 8.
The whole album they did.
Yes,
Oh my god,
it was really long. My poor dad who took me was like, "Oh God, no! This isn't like the original Live 8." It was like Linkin Park came out and did a set, and then Jay-Z came out and was like, "Y'all ready for this?"
Oh god, do you want more? Cooking it raw with the Brooklyn Boys. Why are we putting these two together?
My poor dad. I think he also sat through an entire Kanye West
Oh,
set.
God bless him.
Yeah. Who which was like revolutionary for me. I was like, what? Like, but wow, yeah.
Linkin Park tangent.
What a man. My dad. It was
Joe Lomas.
Joe Lomas, Senior, I guess. I don't really know how that all works out. We have the same name. But the Jimmy character, and you figure this out later in the film, that he can kind of have his conscious in one body at a time, and this serves as a great. I think this really freshens the film.
I mean, he is kind of the source of a lot of the comic relief in the film. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Henry can't have any comedic lines because he has no lines.
Right? Yeah. He goes like.
You can't see, but Joe made the hand sign that Henry does, that like okay type thing.
Yeah. You can see it in the trailer.
And I guess he's also a necessary character because without him, it's literally just Henry punching bodies for an hour and a half.
It is,
which it still kind of is, but
right.
But like all dialogue is really just this one-sided conversation between different forms of Jimmy and Henry, which also kind of fits into the like video game thing of he's kind of just like the guide for the video game, like guiding Henry through this world.
Exactly.
Like, come over here, come on, press X to pay your respects.
Hold square to pay your respects. But I think I feel like we're able to jump back and forth through this plot because this plot is fucking paper thin.
Oh yeah.
So later, I mean, this Jimmy character is dying in multiple different scenes. And later we're able to find out that essentially that Jimmy was originally working for Akon. And that he maybe because Akon is such a ruthless sort of boss, and Akon was in charge of making these sort of androids, or these
reanimation
reanimation robots.
Or bioengineered soldiers, I think what they call them.
That he was, that he essentially let him be injured so much that he was paralyzed amongst.
Yeah, I don't think they had really mastered like how to control the soldiers. They have like a video footage that they play of the actual incident happening, and the soldiers all just kind of turn on the Jimmy character, and Akon just lets it. I'm gonna laugh every time we say that.
Right, yeah.
Just lets it happen, to the point where he's paralyzed in there. And then I guess he uses somewhat of that technology to reanimate himself numerous times. They didn't totally go into how that came into effect.
He essentially builds
Oh, he's growing versions of himself because he, at one point, they bring down like a little like baby Jimmy.
Right, yeah. He's able to build robots of himself going into different variations of his personality. Whether it's sort of the tough, whether it's like the Jason Statham like tough guy who leads Henry out of the first conflict that he's in, or it's sort of later we meet like a limey old bastard like World War II sort of like version of Jimmy. There's
or
a
like
lot of
the
different...
second one we meet is like because when you first realize that there's different versions of him, like Henry gets on a bus to like get away from like the car accident and where Jimmy was shot in the head in the car, and then you see this like homeless kind of guy walk up to him, and we find out through his beard that it's actually Jimmy there, and that's when you're kind of like, whoa, what the fuck is like going on here?
Right, exactly.
Just a lot of like different versions of himself. There's like a punk like hardcore like version of himself with like a big like mohawk and like a leather jacket and patches and shit.
Yeah, it's like God save the Queen.
Is that what it says?
I don't know what it says.
Just says oi.
Oi. What did Nick say is time to get strange.
Let's get strange. Let's get hardcore.
But I mean, from this we're able to, I mean, there's along the way there's a lot of very neat sort of set pieces. For example, when he is on the bus, there's Jimmy calls out, the homeless Jimmy calls out the window. He says like, "Hey, like faggot, like where do you get like a jacket like that or something?" He literally says that.
Yeah.
And the guy turns around and it's a guy who has this like pretty cool like looking like outfit on. Like it's kind of like this sort of sci-fi kind of pyramids, like all
it's
constructed.
like a jacket made of like triangles
mirrors
and angles and whatnot.
And he has a flamethrower and he shoots the bus with the flamethrower and he's catching everybody in the bus on fire, including the Jimmy clone.
Mm-hmm.
And Henry's able to escape that, and that was like one of the set pieces that I really enjoyed.
Just that jacket, or
the jacket and like the flamethrower and everything.
Jimmy liked it too.
it was like a really cool effect. Between that and when he goes into the Jimmy laboratory, I really don't remember anything. Is there any plot points that you'd like to elaborate on?
I'm trying to think of like exactly what happens. Like he leaves the bus. He's like on fire. I think he's kind of running through like the bus station.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of what
Jimmy gives
reminded me of
gives him the instructions when he's on the bus, and then he goes to find another one of Akon's bioengineered soldiers to basically pull out like his battery unit to charge himself. Mm-hmm. So that's the entire movie is really just like, oh, they're fighting here, they're fighting here, they're fighting
scenes.
here. Yeah. It's a little more entertaining than that, obviously, but when it comes down to plot, it's really just like, oh, well, Jimmy had to go here to do this, and then he had to go here to do this and whatnot. So he goes to get like the battery unit. I kind of go fuzzy there on what.
Right, yeah, it's
kind of like the same characters over and over again, literally, because it's just different versions of like Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I guess he brings that to, that's the other thing that makes it more like a video game, is that he literally has like a cell phone that Jimmy gave him.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And Jimmy, because he can't have a conversation with Jimmy because he doesn't have a speech module, like Jimmy keeps calling him and just like leaving him like one-sided like voice messages like, here, I'm sending you the location that you need to go to for your like next objective, which is literally like dialogue just like straight out of like a video game. Mm-hmm. But he ends up going to, that's another interesting scene to talk about. He goes to, Jimmy says, oh, come meet me at this real high-class establishment that I'm at. And he sends you the location, and he ends up going to a brothel there in, I guess, are they in Russia in the film, or? I know it's a Russian filmmaker, but I don't know if it's staged in Russia.
I believe it's all in Russia. I think that was another. I don't have this in my notes, but I remember thinking in the theater, Akon has a monologue about sort of Russians purchasing a lot more bats than baseballs, and I thought that was a super interesting, like a really great monologue for this film, just to imply that everybody in Russia is not interested in baseball.
Yeah.
They're more interested in hurting, in intimidating and hurting people than they are in playing baseball. And it was a little confusing because it was also English, but it was set in a Russian setting, and then also there were some people that were just completely Russian.
Yeah, when they say like the Jimmy character has like some of his versions have like English accents. I think some of them might have his like tradition, because he's South African, might have his like traditional South African accent. That actor, what's his name? He's from District 9.
Yeah.
Sharto Copley. He's Vickis from District 9. But yeah, he sends sends Henry his location, says come to this high class establishment, and he goes there, and it's just a common brothel in Russia, with just a lot of boobs running around, which is an interesting thing to see in like a first person perspective. Like you kind of expected it was going to happen at some point in an R-rated first person POV type movie, but that's when it started.
Was it R-rated?
I would assume so.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there was boobs all over the place. Were boobs. A lot of. I think the. Let me see if I can find where they had it, because the rating had something like, it had an adjective to describe the violence that was like particularly funny when I was reading it.
But no, yeah, I can believe that too, because again, like the sort of cranked. It was definitely appealing towards the cranked audience, which was like, I need to fuck you in this public place.
It's like firing on like all cylinders. Like in the version of Jimmy that he meets there is literally like sniffing coke off like prostitutes like backs, stuff like that.
That's my favorite version.
Doing
of Jimmy,
way too much coke, and he's got like literally like 5 or 7 like prostitutes like in the room with him. And they've got their boobs all over the place, and then something happens where he leaves the room, and Henry's kind of like starting to like fade because he's losing power, and Jimmy goes to, I think that's why he leaves, is to go figure it out. And he actually ends up going to go become a different version of himself. But like all the prostitutes start like swarming Jimmy, which is really interesting in like first person, just to have like all these like Henry to have like all these like boobs around you in first person. And then they have like these really like corny lines about like, oh, I know what'll make him feel better. Like, I think that was the moment, because this is still kind of early on in the film where I like realized like what kind of film this was trying to be. Like, it's really not taking itself seriously at all. Not that it's necessarily a comedy, but it's just pure entertainment. And like a line like that, like in any other film, would just not fly. Like it's so blatantly like sexist, and like, all prostitutes want to do is have sex. Like it's not a job to them. It's very insensitive. But in a movie like this, it ends up working, because it's just like, this is what people who are in first person want to see in a movie like this, is boobs and girls that just want to have sex with you.
Like, they know Henry is a robot, and they also know like Henry does not have any money on him, but they're still unzipping his pants and be like, I'll know it.
Yeah, he doesn't have to pay.
But no, like, it's very,
said no prostitute ever.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very interesting brothel scene. But yeah, no, I'm trying to think of what eventually leads him to the Jimmy's lab.
I'm kind of trying to like browse through the Wikipedia plot. Is actually really long. They went like really in detail with everything that happens. He's in the brothel. Oh, and I guess Akon actually ends up showing up at the brothel and fucking some people up.
Right.
And then he literally, this was a scene that I thought was weird, is he literally throws Henry out of the brothel.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
through like an air duct or something. But it was just kind of like, it must have been something that they did in editing. But he just kind of throws him, and he's in the brothel one minute, and then he
trash shoot or something.
yeah. But it happens so quick. There's a lot in this movie that happens so quick, and like I forgive a lot of it because of the type of movie that it's trying to be. It's first person. It's got to be a fucking nightmare to try and like plan out those shots because it's literally just a camera that's on someone's head. Like, so trying to like edit it all together has got to be a nightmare. But yeah, he's literally just in the brothel one minute, and then he's in like the parking garage the next minute. I think he ends up riding. When they're in the brothel, like those two like dominatrix women end up coming into with the swords and shit. Jimmy's like girlfriends for one of his personalities.
Right.
I think, is that when they all go to the woods, or
So I think in the parking lot.
no, they get the sidecar. That was another part that was very much like out of a video game. Like,
Right. Yeah.
oh, hey, this vehicle just conveniently happens to be where we are right now, and we need to travel a long distance. Get in.
Yeah, so he gets in the sidecar. I think they track down Akon's convoy, and after a firefight, Henry convenes or
He like breaks into the one truck
Yeah.
and sees that Estelle is in there.
right, and before he can rescue her, Akon arrives and prepares to strike Estelle with a baseball bat. But again, he has that whole monologue about the baseball bat, and Henry sort of sacrifices himself to save her. He sort of volunteers to take her place, and he's struck unconscious. From there, he's sort of revived by...
A different like hippie version of Jimmy in the woods.
right, yeah.
And then a fucking tank comes through the woods. I was surprised that they didn't have a scene because like Henry ends up like killing all the people that are operating the tank. I was surprised they didn't have a scene where he hopped in the tank.
Yeah, definitely.
Like
Yeah,
another vehicle
I was
scene.
expecting that too.
I kind of hoped they would have had that.
He definitely has a scene where he fights everybody in the tank, and then he fights everybody in a helicopter, and then
I'm not sure exactly what happens in between those, but it's in that kind of same setting of like in the woods after he's being revived from this whole thing. I think he might end up having like another flashback to his father, because there's that beginning scene where he's getting bullied and his father says stuff about like, are you just gonna sit there and like let them spill your?
Well, at first you don't know that it's his father. At first it's just kind of like, I think in the beginning is like, you just see a man come out of the junkyard and he says like, "What's wrong?" Or he's like, "You're a pussy," that kind of thing, and you don't really know the context yet. And it's Tim Roth.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Roth is his dad. And he says, "You're a pussy." And it's not until a later scene that he says that he gets enough, that Henry has enough, what were we talking about before? What is the word of the day? Exposition?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that he has enough exposition where he remembers exactly what he says. Which we'll get to. Later.
Anyway, he has this flashback, and then I thought one of like the funniest scenes and like really just playing up to like the tone of this movie is like Henry sees like a horse, and he has to, I forget where he has to get at that. I guess he's just trying to get back to Estelle and whatnot at that point. And he hops on the horse, and you think you're gonna have like this like first person horse like riding scene, and he immediately gets bucked. Like the music is literally swelling at that point, and then he gets bucked off the horse, and then he's just like, all right, well I guess I'm walking from here.
That I did enjoy that scene a lot. Do you want a bottle of water?
No, I'm good. Nah, bro, I'm good.
All right. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in the woods. He does meet this Henry, who is this pot addled, sort of more into like, yeah, like I want to fuck women, like kind of character. There's also a scene where after the tank, he defeats this helicopter, and I think you see it in the trailer, but after he sort of like interferes with this helicopter and kills everybody aboard, that he jumps off the helicopter with some sort of device, and he's like aiming for a lake, and he ends up just kind of like slamming into a tree on the land, and I thought that was a great scene. Really getting into the just dumb fucking scenes.
We were trying to get to the point where he gets to the lab, and that's pretty much it. Is that I think literally after he like kills all those guys, like Jimmy again, like, hey, here's my location on my cell phone.
Right, exactly.
Here's where you have to go.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the horse comes in. And
he gets on the horse. Blah blah blah. He ends up getting to the like abandoned hotel that Jimmy's at, and I think that's where he meets like the sniper version of Jimmy in like the ghillie suit who comes out. And then he goes in the lab, and Jimmy explains the whole how he was hired by like Akon to create this whole like cyborg bioengineered soldier army. That's how Jimmy got like paralyzed and became like a vegetable, and how he was able to, or why he wanted to create all these different versions of himself. And then we have one of the weirdest scenes in this movie.
Yes.
A musical theater number.
Yes.
Which is very well edited and performed. Mm-hmm. Well, not musically well performed, but the acting is great for Sharlto Copley, however you say his name. But it's basically just this, I forget what song it is. I don't know if I can find it on Wikipedia. It's like an old-timey like musical theater type song.
Right, yeah.
But with just all these different versions of Jimmy. Mm-hmm. Because they can only one can be conscious at a time. So one will come out, sing one part, and then he'll literally like pass out, and then another one will come out and do his part and pass out, and they keep kind of repeating it and whatnot.
Which I was kind of into this. It's a musical number, but I was also into the scene because it was just it was just like a part of this film, you know?
It definitely played into just the balls to the wall, like anything goes.
Kind of like
film.
throwing enough stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
Kind of like
I wish. I don't think Sharlto Copley is a particularly great singer, so I don't think his singing performance is that great, even though like it's a difficult scene to perform because you're literally performing one song as like, you know, like 5 to 10 different people, which are still versions of the same sort of character,
right?
Having to portray the actual like act of like singing one line, going unconscious, becoming conscious as another character, and I imagine the editing for that was a fucking nightmare.
Right? Yeah.
But I mean, it plays off well, and it's just kind of one of those things where you're just like, all right, well, this is hardcore Henry.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly.
Anything will literally go at this point for this movie.
But following this, they kind of put Henry under some sort of analyzation of what's going on within his...
Yeah, they literally plug into him with like 1/4-inch like music cables, instrument cables.
Which they do in the beginning of the film too, and they're like, what the fuck? Like, you're broadcasting live to Akon, essentially. And from here, and then they see through this hidden secret camera sort of base that they're in, they see that that Akon's sort of goons are approaching, and
I'm laughing because there's a line where Akon literally says like, "Send goons with guns to your house."
Right. And I think
Akon the rapper, not Akon the supervillain from Hardcore Henry.
But I think following that scene is maybe one of my favorite scenes in this movie, and it's where they're lowering the original Jimmy in a wheelchair down through this sort of abandoned
hotel type thing.
Yeah, sort of hotel apartment complex down this sort of level. And there's like, yeah, through like the center of this building. And there's this clear sense of geography and sort of objective where they have to keep him alive, and they're kind of like killing everybody on like a certain level. And it's kind of like, keep the cripple like above you or something.
Yeah.
And it's a really great scene, and I really like it. As opposed to the final boss scene, which I'm not like.
The only thing I
crazy
didn't like
it.
about that cripple scene is that like there's all like the different versions of Jimmy throughout.
Right.
And I don't want to say this was my least favorite version of Jimmy because I thought he was the funniest, but that like the World War One like doughboy version of Jimmy
Right.
is funny, but he's the most distant from what the original and actual Jimmy is, because the other ones are not that. They're different versions of his personality. There's like the sniper, there's like the homeless guy. They're kind of just Jimmy in like different costumes, but like the World War One like doughboy Jimmy has like a drastically like different accent. He's got like different like memories and shit. Like he's talking about like his granddad and whatnot.
Right, yeah.
And he literally is just acting like someone that Jimmy never was. So was never really a part of his personality. So I wasn't.
That was weird.
And it would have been all right if it was just like one scene like for like a punchline. But this is actually the Jimmy that we see the most on screen, just because this fight ends up taking the longest, and the way that it logistically works out, like the longest Jimmy we see is this like World War One doughboy Jimmy. And I wish it would have just been a shorter scene with him, or that someone else had been the Jimmy that we ended up with during that World War, or that big fight scene in the hotel.
Right. Yeah.
It was just way too long for my taste to stick on that one particular Jimmy.
Definitely.
But yeah, and then they end up going to the big boss fight, the horde mode at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I was about to say. Is I like that scene a lot more as opposed to the final boss scene, which I thought was not as clever. It was almost nauseating at points. In the final scene, Henry essentially has to fight an entire army of robots just like himself. And, I felt like this was the scene where Henry was kind of supposed to, like, finally confront the bad guy. But instead it reminded me of, like, when Neo had to fight, like, a slew of, like, Agent Smiths and, like, the Matrix Reloaded.
Yeah.
A scene that I liked when, like, the Matrix Reloaded came out. But, like, now I'm just like, oh, my God. Like,
Yeah.
it's just so much. And, like,
we haven't really talked about this yet, but it's a very overwhelming film. Like, just the like idea of being in first person for like that long in a film. Like, I had an idea that it might feel this way, but it's almost like a little sickening after like a while.
Definitely.
And by the time, just because of the runtime of the movie, by the time that scene comes about, like I found myself kind of just like closing my eyes for like a few seconds at a time, just to like reset,
definitely.
and then like open up and be like, all right, I can handle a few more seconds, and then I would literally close them. And it's not that it was boring for me, or because visually it's still cool. It's a decent scene. But yeah, I would literally just like close my eyes to like make sure I didn't like get sick or like get a fucking headache from just seeing first person movie the entire time. But yeah, he's just like fighting off all these guys. It's getting crazy, and then he literally shoots his legs full of adrenaline from conveniently labeled adrenaline packets that fall conveniently in front of him. For this final boss fight. And I think during that scene, that's actually when they actually start playing the
That's when they start playing the trailer song.
the Don't Stop Me Now, the Queen song. So that was kind of like a pump up scene, just having that going on during that.
I kind of wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting
I thought that was
they
just
would
I thought it was just
that
gonna be a
was an
trailer
actual
thing.
trailer song.
I think it was it would have been more effective if it had been in the trailer, because it kind of killed some of the magic of that. But it does fit well, just because it's just that like feel good, like like action movie, balls to the wall, everything's working right now. And then he kind of has his final boss fight with Akon, and I guess in an hour now we can probably give a big spoiler alert for the kind of bigger reveal.
Right.
are they on a helicopter at this point, or a plane, or
They're in a helicopter, yes.
somehow they end up on a helicopter? To be honest, I can't really tell you how they get onto the helicopter.
Well, before this, he's not on a helicopter. It's before they get onto a helicopter. I'm pretty sure is when between Henry and Jimmy happens.
Henry and Jimmy.
I mean, Henry and Akon happens.
I'm thinking of the scene between Henry and Estelle. I guess Akon is there when that happens. Yeah, they're on the roof of the building. The big reveal is basically that Akon has been using that Estelle is Akon's wife. It's not Henry's wife.
Right. It's sort of like a Total Recall twist.
Yeah, where they've really been using this ploy of, because there's foreshadowing to it beforehand where Jimmy talks about the one problem they couldn't get over was like emotional motivation for these bioengineered soldiers that they're creating. And I guess it was Estelle's idea to kind of insert herself in the first memory that these bioengineered soldiers will have when they wake up, because they've been making a ton of them, is Estelle, putting this ring on their finger and saying, I love you, Henry. And then there's a scene where they just keep playing like different versions of that, where she's like, I love you, Mark, I love you, Tom, I love you, Jesse, like where they're just kind of fabricating this connection to this fake wife, Estelle, who's actually, I don't know if she's married, but is Akon's main squeeze. And it's really just this ploy to get these bioengineered soldiers to have some kind of emotional motivation to, behind their killing and their action. And Henry was the first one that they were testing it on, and now that they've seen that it's worked, that's what he was showing them, was all the videos that they were essentially going to show all the newer versions of these soldiers. And that's when the film, I think, really kind of like, because before that, yeah, you had that, even as an audience, you had that emotional motivation of like, oh, we've got to get Estelle back, we've got to get his wife back. Right. And at that point, the film is just kind of like, all right, like, I don't know if that's before or after the adrenaline part, but I feel like after that, it definitely took on a more kind of, not crazy kind of tone, and it was more just for humor and completely pure entertainment at that point. There was no emotional connection to anyone, because you're like, all right, our main character is this voiceless robot that now literally has no emotional connection to anyone.
Right, yeah.
But it kind of works in a way. And yet, then they end up on a helicopter somehow. I guess it's after Henry actually defeats Akon. He brings his severed head up to Estelle on the helicopter. And she's like trying to like play like the pity card and like act like it actually was like a real kind of relationship that they had. And she asks like, how could you do this? And he literally writes in someone's blood on the wall, easy. Yeah. The letters easy. Yeah. Which is funny. I think that's like some of like the most like character that we get out of like Henry as a character. That and like the hand signal thing that he does at one point. And then she tries to shoot him. He uses his like, because one of his hands is like robot, like metally kind of. He uses that to deflect the bullet and ends up hitting her, and she kind of like stumbles out of the airplane. And she's trying to give again like another speech to like convince him that like she was real. It was real the entire time. Blah blah blah. And the movie literally ends with him just closing the fucking hatch doors on the airplane, helicopter, whatever it is, on her fingers.
Right, yeah.
And then the like credits roll after that.
Which is a really great ending.
It's satisfying, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think you kind of feel that frustration of like, as the audience, of like, you kind of, Estelle is one of the few faces we actually see in this movie that he's not just like beating to a bloody pulp.
Oh,
like,
definitely. Yeah, right.
So it's someone that you kind of relate to, and it's really the only motivation that he's had for doing anything in the movie. So then as an audience member, you're like annoyed with her when you find out that she was lying not only to him, but conversely to us, not only by being the first person vessel, but by being just the audience watching this movie. So then it's really satisfying to see him just completely fuck her up.
It's sort of like Casino Royale when Daniel Craig is like, the bitch is dead.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
like what a great like It is. It's something that I think it didn't have to have like Hollywood inject itself into this film, where it's just literally a plot by itself, where it's just kind of like the bitch is dead at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
And it
didn't
really-
have to have a love interest, really.
Yeah, and really the only like exposition and like emotion that they end up, and I say like emotion like in quotes, that they end up inserting is through the flashback to his father. But like the speech that he ends up giving is like, you know, are you gonna be a pussy, or are you gonna like stand up for yourself and kick some ass?
Right, yeah. And it's,
Which in context is like a weird thing to say to like an 8-year-old kid.
is,
Like, are you gonna
it
go
is.
spill their blood?
It is, because really the opening scene.
Are you sure, Dad?
The opening scene is like kind of like these kids smashing Henry's robot head against a wall, and then them beating him up, and then really after 80% of the film, you get some sort of exposition where Tim Roth is not just a guy who says "you pussy," and like he goes like "you pussy." That's what my dad would have called me. He's like, are you just gonna sit there with the blood in your mouth, or are you gonna go and spill theirs? He says something along those lines, and that's like essentially the entire exposition of the film. There's no really explanation of how Akon got his telekinetic or like magneto powers.
Yeah.
Which I have no problem with. It's one of those films.
Well, there's no explanation why they're like in like a laboratory in the sky either.
Right, yeah.
Or what exactly Akon intends to do with these bioengineered soldiers.
Well, he says something about how he's building an army and how he can be on like the front lawn of the White House or the like by the Eiffel Tower tomorrow.
World domination, we're left to assume. But...
Right, yeah. But I mean, there's no like and I didn't even really need to know like whether Akon was partially robot or something, and that's how he got
That's
those
the thing, is like
powers.
on paper, this is a fucking horrible movie.
No, yeah, definitely, yeah.
But it's really enjoyable.
It is.
Like, we really should hate this movie.
I think this film knows exactly what it is the entire time it's being filmed. I don't know. I'm okay with this film a majority of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't care that Akon has like magneto powers that nobody ever explains. I'm okay with that. There's a lot of things they don't explain, but I'm just like, yeah, okay. Because I think this film knows that it's that kind of film.
Did you have, like, how did you feel when you immediately left, like, the theater? Like, walking out?
So I saw this film. I left work.
I mean, like, physically, how did you feel? Like,
I left work, and my friend Jeff actually works with Regal Theaters, so he was able to take me to a free showing midnight special. Mm-hmm. So I saw that, and then I came home and I had dinner, and I took a shower, and I was like, you know what, Savory, I'm gonna go see Hardcore Henry. I'm just gonna get it out of the way. So I went to this showing, and it was at 10, and I was the only person in the theater, again, on opening night, which was weird. And I kind of had to like fight off like falling asleep during this movie, and I had a headache during this movie. But I left the theater kind of feeling like I liked the movie, kind of, mm-hmm. Like it was just kind of like this. It knew exactly what it was. It wasn't trying to be anything more than it was.
I mean, or like physically, because like
physically, I felt exhausted.
Because like I just had like a weirdest feeling when I walked out, because it's such, I've never experienced it before, because again, we haven't seen an entire movie. I'm not sure what the actual runtime is. I should look it up, but like, it's a decently long movie. I feel like I'm trying to look up 96 minutes. That's not that bad.
Right.
It feels very long just because it's
It
first
does.
person. Either way, we've never seen anything of this length for first person POV the entire time.
Right.
Which like I feel like the movie is really not that deep.
It isn't.
And I don't think this is at all what they tried to do, especially knowing that it was made based on two like music videos for a Russian like indie rock band, and they were someone was just like, hey, you should make like a full-length movie out of this. But it ends up almost being like a study on like our own like perspective and like field of view and like vision. Like,
right.
I came out of the theater. It's a really weird experience to watch a movie in first person and then to walk out of the theater and be like, oh, this is still first person. Like,
right, yeah.
Like, you feel like you're still kind of like in the movie. Driving home was such a weird experience after this movie. Like,
yeah, I
felt like I was still fucking like in the movie. And I feel like unintentionally that ends up being like a really deep thing about this movie is just like a study on what it's like to see things through your own eyes, like, or through someone else's eyes rather.
Right, yeah. And I mean, this wasn't exactly original film. Like, this isn't the first film that's entirely like first person POV or anything. But it is. It's original in some sense that it's in a completely action and it's completely indie and it's completely not completely indie, but it's definitely the first of its kind in a sense. And I think reviewers were like, this is sort of like a predecessor of like what's to come in action films or something like that.
I hope not.
I hope not either, because I honestly
I'm glad I saw
this.
this. Yeah. I'm glad this was made, but I kind of don't want there to be another one like this. I like it because it was, for me at least, I haven't seen any other POV first person ones. It was unique for me. I'm glad I saw one. I'm glad it was this one.
Right.
But I don't want that to be like the trend in action movies at all. I don't even really want to see a second one at all.
Right. Right. And
one was enough.
I think there was something, I forget what the other POV movie that I heard of. I can't even think of it right now. There's other POV movies, obviously. I forget what I was gonna fucking say.
I think the only other thing I wanted to get into before we got into like overall opinion, since we're probably close to wrapping this up,
right?
You brought up the one scene before when they're on the bus, and the Jimmy character like literally leans out the window, and it's the quote from the movie, so don't hate me, but he says like, "Hey faggot," like,
right.
I like that like coat, like, where did you get it? There's a few other scenes that they have this kind of like homophobic like attitude. The other big one being not as offensive, but it was a better example. When they do that musical theater number, the scene after that, the Jimmy character, he's back in the sniper form, and they're like, unrelated to the point that I'm trying to make, but it was a funny line where he's talking about like, oh, I count at least by my count 30 guys. We've got to eliminate at least half of them to stand like a fighting chance. Like, again, like there's a clear cut objective of what we have to do in this video game. But right after that, he just kind of has this like side note to Henry where he's like, you know, there's a lot of like perception about guys that like musical theater numbers. Just so you know, I'm straight like as an arrow or something like that. So basically, like, just so we're clear, I'm straight. And I think in like coming from maybe like any other filmmaker, you could have kind of wrote those lines off as being like, oh, like that's just the character of like Jimmy and whatnot.
Right, yeah.
But I think coming from a Russian filmmaker, it maybe made me feel a little uneasy just knowing about the way that gay rights and LGBT is treated in Russia, where it's like a huge issue. Like, they have not really made like any progress at all. Like, it kind of seems like more like that might just actually be how the director feels about stuff when he's writing stuff. So that was a little, I think, for me, unnerving to hear lines like that.
It was.
I couldn't write those off as, oh, you know, that's just Jimmy being Jimmy. It seems more like, oh, that's just the Russian attitude of how we feel towards gay people.
Exactly.
So I feel like that might be, as weird it is to say, one of my biggest criticisms of the film, just knowing the background of it.
Because the way he said it was like, don't tell anybody. Like, please. Like, they're in a scene where they're about to die. Yeah. And he said, don't tell anybody that we like musical theater.
Yeah.
Like, that's like the first thing on his mind. No, it definitely bothered me too.
And again, like it is funny and like it's well performed, like and the concept is kind of funny, but just knowing the meta aspects, the outside of the film aspects of who created it and whatnot.
Yeah.
Someone had to write that line, and that someone happened to come from a country where this stuff is like they've got a lot of progress left to make over there in Russia.
Exactly.
Which is weird to be talking about that in a film like Hardcore Henry.
It is, yeah. Uh-huh.
But I guess we can probably start swinging towards our overall opinions of the film to wrap this bad boy up.
To say, how many fingers do we think Hardcore Henry
How many fingers
presents?
is Henry holding up?
Oi, how many fingers does Hardcore Henry think it deserves?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
I'll go first if you want.
All right.
Overall, like we've said, it was absolutely ridiculous. But it's also just honestly just plain fun. I think some of the humor might be a little bit lost in translation for American audiences. There's some lines that you could tell were supposed to be funny, but they just had that kind of, not literally lost in translation, but just a different humor for, different cultures that maybe we weren't fully getting. But I think there's still a lot to enjoy. I think, again, it was only 96 minutes, but based on the type of movie that it is, I think it could have been a little bit shorter, or at least certain fight scenes could have been a little bit shorter, just because they're really, again, there's not a lot of plot. So it ends just being a lot of literally just seeing Henry punch and shoot different bad guys. And after a while,
Right.
It's like, well, we've seen this already, especially by the time the like horde mode last fight comes around. I thought the twist at the end, or the reveal with Estelle, was actually kind of cool. And I think it works, again, like I mentioned before, with us as like an audience level of, and it just kind of sends the film in sort of a new direction at that point that I really enjoyed. And kind of, I think that's when Henry as a character works the best, with his like cold-hearted nature of like,
Right,
easy and, slamming the door on Estelle's fingers and whatnot. And I also said this before, but I don't know that I necessarily want another POV movie, but I am glad that this one was made and that we
Right.
saw it and reviewed it. But yeah, my main complaints would really just be the lack of plot and the homophobia that was in it. But overall, it was enjoyable, so I'm going to give it 3.5 fingers out of 5.
All right, nice. Yeah. Here's a few thoughts that I didn't get a chance to touch on during the overall review. But I remember reading an interview with the director, and he was praising himself for using practical effects anytime that he could, as opposed to CGI. And I feel like this wasn't in reference to all the CGI blood splatter. Like what about squibs? Those exist.
Yeah.
I feel like this film would have looked a lot more authentic with squibs. Something about CGI blood splatter sort of like takes me out of it. You're able to more like sort of emotionally distance yourself from like a CGI blood splatter, as opposed to maybe even like fake blood
Yeah.
being splattered everywhere. And I can imagine that maybe even the CGI fake blood stood out because of the GoPro quality footage. Also, the filmmakers didn't try to make this film appear as like one continuous shot, like what's his name's Birdman or something. The jump cuts definitely, helped appropriately sort of pace the action of the film. There's little whip pans and sort of dissolving between two takes, which bothered me. I was hoping it'd either be like jump cuts or whip pans with the one continuous shot. However, the overall film sort of flowed pretty seamlessly. And this is just like a little fact that I forgot to also say. And you can probably see this in the trailer even if you didn't see the film. But the scene where Henry slides down the escalator and
I read that, yeah.
like knocks a woman violently to the ground, that wasn't planned. That was just an extra that missed her mark and was standing in the wrong area, resulting in her being knocked over. I feel like I'm talking really weird right now. Knocked over.
Knocked over?
Yeah, if you're gonna smirk that. And after that, she reportedly popped up and was like, did they get the shot? Kind of thing. So, like, it was a lot more kind of Russian as opposed to, like, I'm gonna sue you!
Yeah.
Like, kind of, you know. Which is refreshing.
For an extra, definitely.
That's a really, like, you watch, they put that shot in the trailer for a reason. Like, she's very violently knocked over.
Uh-huh.
It is very sort of, that's one of the most realistic shots in the entire film.
I also read that they originally shot that scene and ended up cutting the entire movie, and the director felt that scene was like particularly dull, so that was like one of the last scenes that they shot for the movie.
Really?
And did a whole reshoot because it was so dull.
Wow.
And then they end up getting that kind of cool shot out of that.
Yeah.
So I bet he was like, oh God, I'm a genius for
Right,
sending
yeah.
us back to set to reshoot this one scene.
You're right. Wow. I don't know. I feel like I ended up appreciating it more than I liked it. Which I think I'm going to give it a 2.5. 2.5 fingers for this film.
So that would come out to 3 fingers as the aggregate for the podcast.
3 fingers. We're missing your score, Nick Osello. Wishing you were here.
You can only imagine what you would have gave it.
Can only imagine all the
I can only imagine.
the
What are you trying to do?
I don't even know.
I couldn't even tell if you got the song reference that I was making.
I did, but then I forgot like what I was going to say. Guys, this is the obvious fourth episode that
The
we're,
infamous fourth episode of our
infamous
batch.
fourth episode that we're recording.
We're
Jesus.
coming up on 4 a.m.
Yes. It is, yeah, we're 5 minutes from 4 a.m.
You can only imagine what it's like.
Only imagine.
I don't remember what the next lyrics to that are.
I was about to say like the Jason Statham like impression that Nick would do, but like it had too many syllables and I froze on my spot.
That was all right. You should have just gone with it.
I should have, but I was just like, maybe if I stop, it'll be less embarrassing, which it wasn't. Anyway.
But yeah, final conclusion, 3 fingers from How Many Fingers the Podcast. Just the usual wrap up. Check us out on our website, howmanyfingerspodcast.com. It's a mess.
Yeah. And you can also follow us at, or tweet at us at our Twitter handle at HMF Podcast, or follow us on Facebook, which is How Many Fingers Podcast.
Instagram as well, How Many Fingers Podcast. And make sure you leave us a review, nice little star rating or finger rating, whatever you want to call it, on your favorite podcast listening app, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and the like. So signing out for How Many Fingers the Podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Joe.
And oi!
Oi! Oh, get strange! Local Henry.